Welcome, and thank you for joining us. Please subscribe to our channel for more weekly sleep videos. The monastery stands where it has stood for 300 years, its stone walls rising grey and solid against the hillside. In the hour before dawn, when darkness still holds the valley, the first bell rings. Its tone moves through corridors and cells, through the cloister and across the courtyard, marking the beginning of another day. The bookbinder wakes to this sound, as he has for 20 years. His cell is small, a bed, a chair, a wooden chest, a window that faces east. He dresses in the dim light, pulling on the same dark robes he wears every day, and makes his way down the worn stone steps to the chapel. The chapel fills with the low murmur of morning prayers. Voices rise and fall in chant, Latin words that have been spoken in this space for centuries. The bookbinder stands among his brothers, his voice joining theirs, the melody familiar as breathing. When the prayers end, silence returns, the particular silence of the monastery, which is not empty but full, a presence of its own. After prayers comes the first meal, taken in silence in the refectory. Bread, cheese, sometimes fruit, the sound of wooden spoons against wooden bowls. Then the day's work begins. The bookbinder is a lay brother, not an ordained monk. He took no holy orders, made no vows of poverty or chastity in the formal sense, but his life here differs little from the monks. He rises with them, prays with them, eats with them. His work, though, is his own, a craft he brought with him when he came to the monastery as a young man, seeking a life of quiet and purpose. He walks through the cloister now, his footsteps echoing softly against the stone. The cloister forms a square around an open courtyard, covered walkways on all four sides. In spring and summer, a garden grows in the center, herbs mostly, and a few flowers. Now, in the cooler months, the garden sleeps, the earth dark and resting. The cloister connects all the vital spaces of the monastery. On one side, the chapel, on another, the refectory and kitchens, and here, along the eastern wall, the scriptorium and library, and beyond them, his workshop. The scriptorium is where the monks copy manuscripts. Through its doorway, he can see them at their desks, bent over parchment, their quills moving with careful precision. The work of copying is sacred work, preserving scripture, preserving knowledge, preserving the words of saints and scholars. The room is filled with focused silence, broken only by the scratch of pen on parchment, the occasional turning of a page. Beyond the scriptorium lies the library. Its heavy wooden door stands open, and through it he glimpses the shelves that line the walls, floor to ceiling. Books rest there in rows, their spines facing outward. Some leather, some wood, some cloth. Books of prayer and theology, books of philosophy and natural history, books of music and mathematics. Some are older than the monastery itself, brought here by the founding brothers. Others have been made here, copied and bound within these walls. The library is not a place of movement or noise. Monks come to read, to study, to pray with the texts. They handle the books with reverence, as though each volume holds something living. And perhaps they do. Words written by hands long turned to dust, thoughts preserved across centuries, knowledge that would have vanished without the work of copying, of binding, of keeping. The bookbinder continues past the library to his own workshop. It is a smaller room, but it has good light. two windows facing south and east. His tools wait where he left them the evening before. His bench, his press, his knives and awls and needles. Stacks of gathered pages waiting to be sewn. Boards cut to size. Leather soaking in a basin. This is where he spends his days, in the rhythm of the work. The bells mark the hours, midday prayers, afternoon prayers, vespers as the light fades. He stops when they ring, joins his brothers in the chapel, then returns to his bench. By the time Compline sounds, the final prayers of the day, his hands are tired and his back aches in the familiar way. After Compline, silence falls more completely. The great silence, they call it. No speaking until morning prayers. The brothers move like shadows through the corridors, each to his own cell. The bookbinder climbs the stairs once more, lies down in the darkness, and listens to the quiet. Somewhere in the valley below, a dog barks. The wind moves through the eaves, and the books rest in the library, waiting for tomorrow, as they have waited for all the tomorrows before this one, as they will wait for all the tomorrows to come. The workshop occupies a corner room on the ground floor, positioned to catch the best light the monastery can offer. Two windows frame the southern and eastern walls, tall and narrow in the old style, their glass thick and slightly warped with age. In the morning, sunlight streams through the eastern window, falling directly across the workbench. By afternoon, the southern window takes over, keeping the room bright until the sun begins its descent behind the hills. Light is everything in this work. The bookbinder arranges his day around it, saving tasks that require precision for the hours when the sun is strongest. The delicate work of sewing, threading the needle through tiny holes in folded parchment, keeping the tension even. This must be done while he can see clearly. The cutting of leather, the paring of edges to paper thinness, the tooling of decorative patterns, all of this demands good light. Candles exist, of course. They stand in iron holders near the bench, and on winter afternoons when the sky darkens early, he lights them. But candlelight is precious, made from beeswax rendered in the monastery's own workshop, and it cannot be wasted. Besides, candles cast shadows that shift and confuse the eye. Better to work by daylight when possible, and to save evening tasks for those that can be done by touch, sorting materials, organizing tools, preparing tomorrow's work. The workbench dominates the room. It is old oak, its surface scarred and stained by decades of use. Perhaps another bookbinder worked here before him, or perhaps it served some other craft. The wood bears the marks of many blades, small cuts and gouges that tell stories he will never know. He has added his own marks over the years, and the bench accepts them without complaint. Along the back edge of the bench, tools rest in careful order. Knives of different sizes and purposes, some for cutting leather, some for paring it thin, some for trimming pages. A bone folder, smooth from use, for creasing and smoothing. Awls for piercing holes. Needles of various weights, threaded with linen cord. A small hammer. Brushes for applying paste. Each tool has its place, and each returns to that place when its work is done. To the left of the bench stands the press, a wooden frame with a great screw that turns, bringing two flat plates together with steady, even pressure. The press is essential. After the pages are sewn together, after the boards are attached, the book must be pressed to set its shape, to marry all the parts into a single whole. Sometimes a book stays in the press for a day, sometimes for 3. The bookbinder knows by feel when the pressing is complete, when the book has found its final form. Shelves line the walls, and on these shelves the materials wait, stacks of parchment, some new and pale, some older and yellowed, boards cut from oak or beech, sized for different volumes, rolls of leather, calfskin mostly, though occasionally goatskin or sheepskin. The leather comes from the monastery's own animals or from farms in the valley, tanned and prepared by craftsmen in the town. Spools of thread, pots of paste made from flour and water, beeswax for sealing and waterproofing. The smells of the workshop are constant companions. Leather carries its own particular scent, earthy and rich, slightly sweet when it is new, deeper and more complex as it ages. The beeswax adds a warmer note, honey-like even after the honey has been extracted. Parchment smells of age and animal, a smell that is not unpleasant, but undeniably present. And underneath all of this, the smell of the workshop itself, old wood, dust, the faint mustiness that comes from stone walls that have stood for centuries. The sounds, too, become familiar. The soft shush of a blade moving through leather, the whisper of thread being pulled through parchment, tightening with each pass, the creak of the press as its screw turns, wood against wood, the sound growing deeper as the pressure increases. Sometimes a floorboard groans under his weight as he moves from bench to shelf. Sometimes the wind rattles the windows in their frames. In this room, in this light, surrounded by these smells and sounds, the bookbinder works. His hands move through motions they have performed thousands of times, measuring, cutting, folding, sewing. Each book is different, different size, different purpose, different challenges, but the fundamental rhythm remains the same. The work unfolds in its own time, patient and deliberate, measured not in hours but in stages completed, in progress made toward wholeness. A stack of gathered pages waits on the corner of the bench. Tomorrow, or perhaps the day after, they will become a book. But for now, the afternoon light is fading. The bell for vespers will ring soon. The bookbinder wipes his blade clean, returns his tools to their places, and steps out into the cloister, leaving the workshop to its quiet. Every book begins with pages. In the scriptorium, the monks have spent weeks, sometimes months, copying text onto sheets of parchment. Parchment is made from animal skin, usually calf, sheep, or goat, stretched and scraped and treated, until it becomes something else entirely, something that will hold ink without bleeding, something that will last for centuries if properly cared for. The bookbinder receives the pages after the copying is complete, after the ink has dried fully. He examines them carefully, checking that they are numbered correctly, that none are missing or damaged. The pages come to him as individual sheets, and his first task is to understand how they will fold, how they will nest together to form gatherings. Most often, a large sheet is folded once to create 2 leaves, 4 pages. Sometimes the sheets are folded twice, creating smaller books. The grain of the parchment matters. Each skin has a hair side and a flesh side, and these must be arranged so that hair faces hair, flesh faces flesh when the book is opened. This creates a visual harmony, page after page. Vellum is finer than ordinary parchment, made from the skin of young calves, smoother and more supple. The monastery uses vellum for special books, illuminated manuscripts, texts meant for the altar, volumes that will be handled with particular reverence. The bookbinder treats vellum with extra care. It is more expensive, more precious, and it responds differently to his tools. When he folds vellum, he can feel its quality in his fingers, the way it wants to hold its crease, the way it seems to glow in certain light. Once the pages are folded and arranged into gatherings, they must be sewn together. This is the heart of bookbinding, the sewing that transforms loose pages into a unified text block. The bookbinder uses hemp cords for this purpose, strong twisted fiber that will not stretch or break. The cords run horizontally across the spine, and he sews each gathering to these cords with careful stitches, linking one gathering to the next in a continuous chain. For smaller books, he sometimes uses leather thongs instead of hemp. Leather is more flexible, better suited to volumes that will be opened and closed many times. He cuts the thongs himself from scraps of calfskin, keeping them narrow and even. The sewing takes time. Each gathering must be pierced with an awl at precise intervals. Then the needle must pass through each hole, wrapping around the cords, creating a structure that is both strong and flexible. When the sewing is complete, the cords extend beyond the top and bottom of the text block like fringe. These will be attached to the wooden boards that form the covers. The boards are cut from oak or beech, solid wood that will protect the pages within. The bookbinder selects boards from his supply, checking the grain, looking for pieces without knots or cracks. The boards must be thick enough to provide protection, but not so thick that the book becomes unwieldy. He measures them against the sewn text block, marking where they need to be cut, then uses his knife and plane to shape them to size. In each board, he cuts channels, narrow grooves where the sewing cords will be seated. He frays the ends of the cords into individual fibers, fans them out, and glues them into these channels. Sometimes he drives small wooden pegs through the boards to hold the cords more securely. The attachment must be strong. The boards will bear the weight of the book's opening and closing for years, perhaps centuries. Now the book has structure, sewn pages, wooden boards, but it is still raw, unfinished. Leather will cover it, protecting the spine and boards, giving it dignity and beauty. The bookbinder chooses leather based on the book's purpose. For working volumes, books that will be consulted daily, he uses calfskin, durable and relatively inexpensive. For finer books, he might use goatskin, which can be dyed rich colors and takes tooling beautifully. Occasionally, for the most important volumes, he uses doeskin or sheepskin, treated to a soft, almost cloth-like texture. He cuts the leather large enough to cover the spine and both boards with room to fold over the edges. The leather is dampened, not soaked, but moistened enough to become pliable. He applies paste to the spine first, smoothing the leather over it, working out any bubbles or wrinkles. The leather wraps around the raised bands where the sewing cords lie beneath, creating horizontal ridges across the spine. These bands are structural, but they also become decorative, dividing the spine into panels. The leather is stretched across each board, folded over the edges, pasted down on the inside. The corners require particular attention. The leather must be trimmed and folded just so, creating neat triangles that lie flat. This is work that cannot be rushed. If the leather dries before it is properly positioned, it will never sit right. He works steadily, his hands moving with practiced efficiency, but never hurrying. Some books receive additional adornments. Metal clasps keep the pages pressed tightly closed, preventing the parchment from warping in damp weather. The clasps are usually brass or bronze, a hinged catch on one board, a corresponding strap on the other. The bookbinder attaches these with small screws or rivets, being careful not to split the wood. Corner pieces, also metal, protect the boards from wear. The corners of a book bear the brunt of handling, and over time they can crack or chip. Metal corners prevent this damage. They're triangular, fitted precisely to the board's edge, attached with tiny nails. For certain valuable books, those that will remain in the library permanently, chains are added. A chain links the book to a reading desk or shelf, preventing theft. The chain attaches to the lower corner of one board, usually the back cover, through a metal ring or staple. It seems a harsh treatment, chaining a book, but in truth, it is a mark of value. Only the most important volumes merit the expense and effort of chains. Most books, though, receive no such elaboration. They are bound simply, covered in plain leather, left to serve their purpose without ornament. The bookbinder takes equal care with these as with the finest volumes. Every book deserves to be well made, to hold together, to protect the words within. Whether it is read by one monk in a quiet cell or studied by generations of scholars, it must endure. The materials are honest things: animal skin, wood from the forest, fiber twisted into cord. But in his hands, they become something more than their parts. They become vessels for knowledge, for prayer, for all the thoughts that human minds commit to parchment, so that they might outlive the thinking of them. The work begins when a manuscript is complete. A monk appears at the workshop door, carrying pages wrapped in cloth. He enters quietly, sets the bundle on the bench, and exchanges a few words with the bookbinder: what the text is, any particular requirements, when it is needed. Then he leaves, and the bookbinder unwraps the pages to see what has been brought to him. Sometimes the pages come fresh from the scriptorium, the ink still dark and sharp. Sometimes they arrive from the illuminator's desk, decorated with painted initials in red and blue, or with elaborate borders of gold leaf and pigment. He examines each page carefully, checking for any damage, any places where the ink has smeared or the parchment has torn. If he finds problems, he returns to the scribe or illuminator to discuss repairs. But usually, the pages are clean and ready. The first task is collation, ensuring that all the pages are present and in correct order. Each page bears a number, usually in the lower corner, and the bookbinder counts through them, making certain none are missing. A book with missing pages is useless, or worse than useless, because the gap might not be discovered until someone tries to read it months or years from now. The pages must also be arranged into gatherings. He sorts them, matching numbers, folding them so that the sequence runs properly. 4 sheets nested together make one gathering of 16 pages. Sometimes a gathering has more sheets, sometimes fewer, depending on the thickness of the parchment and the size of the book. He works methodically, building small stacks, each stack a gathering, each gathering a building block of the finished book. When the gatherings are arranged, he aligns them. This is more difficult than it sounds. Parchment is not uniform. Some sheets are slightly larger, some slightly smaller. The edges are rarely perfectly straight. He taps each gathering against the bench, squaring it up as best he can. Later, after the book is sewn and bound, he will trim the edges with a sharp knife, creating clean margins. But that comes later. For now, he needs them aligned well enough to sew. He marks the spine edge of each gathering, measuring precisely where the sewing holes will go. The holes must align from one gathering to the next, or the sewing will pull crooked and the book will not lie flat. He uses a template for this, a piece of stiff parchment with holes already punched at the correct intervals. He lays the template against each gathering's fold and marks through it with a thin awl, creating shallow dimples that will guide his piercing. Now comes the sewing. He prepares his sewing frame, a simple wooden structure with 2 uprights and a crossbar. Between the uprights, he strings the hemp cords vertically, spacing them according to his marks. These cords will run across the spine of the book, and each gathering will be sewn to them. He takes the first gathering and opens it to the center fold. Starting from the inside, he pierces through the first mark with his awl, pushing out through the parchment. Then he threads his needle with linen thread, strong thread, waxed to help it glide through the holes and to prevent it from rotting over time. The needle goes in from the outside, through the first hole, out through the second hole, around the first cord, back in through the third hole, out through the fourth, around the second cord. The pattern continues in and out, wrapping around each cord as he encounters it. At the end of the gathering, he brings the thread back through and begins the second gathering, sewing it in the same pattern, but also linking it to the first gathering with a small stitch at each end. This linking stitch, called a kettle stitch, binds the gatherings together into a continuous chain. Gathering after gathering, he sews, his hands falling into the rhythm of it. Pierce, thread through, pull tight. Pierce, thread through, pull tight. The motion becomes almost meditative, requiring attention but not conscious thought. The sewing can take hours for a large book, or even several days if the book is very thick, or if other duties call him away. He sews when the light is good, stopping when his eyes grow tired, or when the bells ring for prayer. Gradually, the loose gatherings become a text block, flexible but unified, held together by thread and cords. When the sewing is finished, the cords extend beyond the top and bottom of the text block. These will attach the covers. He prepares the wooden boards, measuring them against the text block, cutting channels where the cords will be seated. He frays each cord into individual hemp fibers, creating a broad fan, and seats this fan into its channel with paste. The paste dries, holding the cords firmly. He may also drive a wooden peg through the board and cord for extra security. Now the book has boards, but the spine is still exposed, the sewing visible. He shapes the spine by rounding it slightly, using his hammer to tap along the fold of each gathering, creating a gentle curve. This rounding serves a practical purpose. When the book is opened, the curved spine allows the pages to fan naturally, reducing strain on the sewing. The cords create raised bands across the spine, horizontal ridges where each cord runs beneath the leather covering. He emphasizes these bands, packing paste or paper strips between them to make them more pronounced. The bands will divide the spine into panels, and later he may tool decorative patterns into these panels. The leather covering comes next. He has already selected and cut the leather, and now he dampens it with a sponge, working water into it until it becomes supple. He applies paste to the spine, then lays the leather over it, smoothing it down with his hands and with the bone folder. The leather molds itself to the shape of the spine, draping over the raised bands, settling into the valleys between them. He works the leather carefully around the bands, making sure there are no bubbles or wrinkles. Then he extends the leather over the wooden boards, front and back, pulling it taut but not so tight that it will tear. At the edges, he folds the leather over, pasting it down on the inside of the boards. The corners are the trickiest part. He must trim the leather at just the right angle and fold it so that the corner lies flat and neat, with no bulk or gaps. When the covering is complete, the book goes into the press. The press applies even pressure across the entire volume, ensuring that all the pasted surfaces bond properly, that the leather adheres smoothly to boards and spine. The screw turns slowly, the plates coming together, and the book settles between them. It will stay in the press for at least a day, sometimes longer. Drying cannot be rushed. If the book is removed too soon, the leather may pull away from the boards, or the spine may lose its shape. The bookbinder knows to be patient. He has other books to work on, other tasks to occupy his time. The pressed book will emerge when it is ready. When the book finally comes out of the press, it looks nearly finished. The leather has dried to a firm, matte surface. The boards are solid and true, but there may be clasps to attach, metal fittings that hook the front cover to the back, keeping the book tightly closed. He positions these carefully, marking where the screws or rivets will go, drilling small pilot holes so the wood does not split. The clasps click into place with a satisfying sound, metal against metal. For some books, especially those meant for the library's permanent collection, he adds decoration, not elaborate illumination, that is, the illuminator's art, but simple tooling on the leather cover. He heats a brass tool in a small brazier until it is hot enough to burn into the leather without charring it. Then he presses the tool against the dampened leather, creating blind impressions, called blind because they are not filled with gold or color, just indented marks that catch the light. He might add a simple border, ruled lines that frame the cover, or a small cross in the center, or the title, if the book is important enough to warrant it, stamped in abbreviated Latin. These marks are modest, functional rather than decorative, but they give the book a finished quality, a sense of intention and care. Finally, the book is complete. The bookbinder holds it in his hands, feeling its weight, opening it to check that the pages turn smoothly, that the sewing holds, that everything is as it should be. Then he sets it aside with the others, waiting to be returned to the library, and he reaches for the next bundle of pages. The process begins again. The work does not flow uninterrupted. Every few hours, the bell rings, and the bookbinder sets down his tools. It does not matter if he is in the middle of sewing a gathering, or if the leather he has been working is at the perfect dampness for covering. When the bell rings, he stops. He wipes his hands on a cloth, brushes any scraps from his tunic, and joins the other brothers moving through the cloister toward the chapel. The prayers are brief at some hours, longer at others. Lauds, prime, terce, sext, none, vespers, compline. The hours that mark the monastic day, that have marked it for centuries. He stands in his place, chants the familiar words, and for those minutes the work falls away entirely. Then he returns to the workshop, and picks up where he left off. If the leather has dried too much, he dampens it again. If it has lost his place in the sewing, he examines the last few stitches to remember the pattern. The interruption is simply part of the rhythm, expected and accepted. Between the prayers, long stretches of silence unfold. Sometimes hours pass in which the only sounds are the ones he makes himself: the scrape of his knife, the whisper of thread, his own breathing. Other monks have the same experience in their own labors. The gardener works in silence. The cook prepares meals in silence. The copyist bends over his parchment without speaking. Silence is not emptiness here. It is presence, attention, a way of being that allows the work itself to speak. The bookbinder has grown so accustomed to it that conversation, when it occasionally occurs, feels almost startling. A few words exchanged with the prior after prayers, a brief discussion with a scribe about a damaged page. These moments of speech punctuate the silence, but do not break it. The silence always returns, deep and patient. Feast days interrupt the usual pattern. On these days, the work stops entirely or nearly so. Christmas, Easter, the feast of the monastery's patron saint. These are days for longer prayers, for celebration within the constraints of monastic life. The refectory serves better food. There might be wine. The mood lightens perceptibly, though no one becomes loud or careless. After the feast day passes, the work resumes as before. But it is the seasons that shape the work most profoundly. In spring and summer, when the days stretch long and the light pours through the workshop windows until evening, the bookbinder can work for hours at a time. The leather dries at a good pace, neither too fast nor too slow. The paste sets properly. His hands do not stiffen with cold. Autumn brings shorter days and the first chill. He begins to notice the light fading earlier, the sun no longer reaching his bench by late afternoon. He adjusts, moving his most detailed work to the morning hours, saving rougher tasks for when the light weakens. He wears an extra layer beneath his robes. Winter is the hardest season. The cold settles into the stone walls and does not leave. His breath makes small clouds in the workshop air. The windows, which let in light, also let in draughts. He keeps his hands moving to maintain warmth in his fingers. But sometimes they grow so stiff that he must pause, flexing them, breathing on them. The damp is worse than the cold. In winter, especially during long stretches of rain, moisture permeates everything. Parchment becomes limp and soft. Leather will not dry properly. Paste grows mold if he is not vigilant. He must judge carefully when to apply paste, when to dampen leather, because the usual drying times no longer hold. A book that would spend 1 day in the press during summer might need 3 days in winter. The light, too, becomes a constant concern. Winter afternoons darken early, and he must light his candles by mid-afternoon if he hopes to continue working. The candle flame flickers, casting moving shadows. His eyes tire more quickly. Some days, he simply stops working when the natural light fails, spending the remaining hours before Vespers in prayer or quiet reading. Storms bring their own disruptions. Thunder rumbles through the valley, shaking the windows. Rain drums against the glass, loud enough to drown out the subtlest sounds of his work. Sometimes the wind is so strong that the candles will not stay lit, and he must abandon work entirely until the weather calms. He sits in the dim workshop then, listening to the storm, waiting. Even without the challenges of weather and season, there are occasional mistakes. A gathering sewn in the wrong order, the error not discovered until several more gatherings have been added. He must cut the thread and re-sew. A board split when he drove a peg through it, the crack running through the wood like a lightning bolt. He must cut a new board and start again. Sometimes the leather tears as he stretches it over a board, the hide too thin at some spot he did not notice. He patches it if he can, or if the tear is too large, he must remove the leather entirely and start the covering process anew. This is wasteful. Leather is expensive, and the monastery does not have unlimited supplies, but there is no alternative. A book with torn covering will not last. There are subtler imperfections too, things that perhaps no one else will notice, but that he sees clearly. A slight unevenness in the sewing tension, making one gathering sit a bit differently from the others. A smudge of paste on the leather that he did not wipe away quickly enough. Tooling marks that are not quite aligned. He does not seek perfection. That would be prideful, a claim to do what only God can do, but he seeks rightness, a book well made according to the standards of the craft. When he falls short, he accepts it. He learns from the mistake if there is something to learn. And then he continues with the next book, the next task, the next day's work. The rhythm holds him. Bells and silence, seasons and storms, prayers and labor. Days fold into weeks, weeks into months. The work continues year after year, a steady stream of manuscripts transformed into books. Each one an act of service, each one a small contribution to the preservation of knowledge and faith. He does not think much about the larger meaning of it. He simply does the work as he has always done, as others did before him, as others will do after. The bell rings for vespers. The bookbinder sets down his knife, brushes leather scraps from the bench into a basket, and steps out into the cloister. The day's light is nearly gone. Tomorrow it will return, and the work will continue. The bookbinder does not think of himself as doing holy work, not in the way the priests celebrate Mass or the monks chant the divine office. He is a craftsman. His hands shape leather and wood and thread. Yet somewhere in the steady rhythm of his labor, in the attention he brings to each task, there is devotion. He prays while he works, though not always in words. Sometimes his lips move silently, forming prayers he learned as a child. The Our Father, the Hail Mary. Simple invocations to the saints. Sometimes he repeats a single phrase from the morning Psalms, letting it echo in his mind as his hands move through their familiar motions. Sometimes there are no words at all, only a sense of offering, of giving this work as a kind of prayer in itself. The books he creates are not merely objects. Many of them are liturgical books, texts used in the daily worship of the monastery, psalters that contain the psalms sung at every hour of prayer, breviaries that hold the prayers and readings for the divine office, missals from which the priest reads during Mass. These books are tools of devotion, vessels through which the community connects with the sacred. When he binds a psalter, he knows that monks will hold it during the night office, when they rise in darkness to sing the psalms. He knows their fingers will turn its pages, the candlelight will fall across its text, that their voices will speak the words it contains. This knowledge shapes his work. He makes the binding strong enough to endure years of use. He ensures the pages turn smoothly. that the book opens fully without straining the sewing. A psalter is not decoration. It must serve. Choir books are different still. These are large volumes meant to rest on lecterns in the chapel, visible to multiple singers at once. The pages are wide, the text written in letters large enough to be read from several feet away. Musical notation runs above the words, square notes on 4-line staves, marking the melody of the chant. The bookbinder approaches these volumes with particular care. Their size presents challenges. The boards must be thick and heavy to balance the weight of so many large pages. The sewing must be especially strong, as the book will be opened flat and left that way for extended periods. He uses extra cords spaced closely to distribute the stress. When he covers a choir book, he often uses the finest leather available, goatskin dyed deep red or green, supple enough to stretch over the large boards without tearing. Sometimes these books receive more elaborate tooling than others, decorative borders or corner pieces, marks of their importance. They are not just functional objects, but statements of reverence, physical manifestations of the community's devotion to liturgy. He has seen his work used. During services, he stands in the chapel with the other brothers, and from his place he can glimpse the books on the lecterns, opened to the day's chants. The cantor turns the pages with careful hands, and the community sings. Voices rise and fall, following the melody marked on the pages, speaking words copied by the scribes and bound by him into permanence. There is a particular moment he has witnessed many times, but which never loses its quiet power. A young monk, newly arrived at the monastery, holds a breviary during his first morning office. The monk's hands are uncertain, unfamiliar with the rhythm of turning pages, finding the correct prayer for the hour. But the book guides him. The structure of it, the marked sections, the clear progression, helps him navigate. The book becomes a teacher, a companion in learning the monastic life. Years later, that same monk might hold the same breviary, his hands now confident and quick. The pages have grown soft at the edges from use. The leather cover has darkened slightly from the oil of his skin. The book has become worn in the particular way that shows it has been cherished, used daily, relied upon, and it still holds together, still opens cleanly, still serves its purpose. This is the bookbinder's hope for every volume he creates, that it will last, that it will serve faithfully, that its physical form will be worthy of the sacred words it contains. Sometimes a book returns to his workshop for repair. The sewing has loosened after decades of use, or a clasp has broken, or the leather has torn at a corner. He examines the damage, remembering when he first bound the book, recognizing his own work. Then he makes the repairs, restoring the book to usefulness. There is satisfaction in this, seeing that his work has lasted long enough to need mending, knowing that it will continue in service. He does not often think about what will happen to these books after he is gone. The future is not his concern, but sometimes, late in the afternoon when the light slants golden through the workshop windows, he imagines the books he has made outlasting him, resting on library shelves long after his hands have stilled, being opened by monks he will never meet, in years he will never see, carrying forward the words, the prayers, the knowledge that the monastery exists to preserve. This is not pride, it is simply fact. Books endure. Words written on parchment and bound between wooden boards can last for centuries if they are well made and well kept. His work is part of that continuity, that long chain of preservation stretching backward to scribes and bookbinders he never knew, and forward to those who will come after. The bell rings for Compline, the last prayers of the day. The bookbinder covers his work, banking the small fire in the brazier where he heats his tools. In the chapel, the community gathers one final time. They sing the Salve Regina, their voices blending in the darkness. The words come from the pages of the choir books, written by scribes, bound by him, sung by all. When the prayers end, silence descends, the great silence of night when no one speaks, when the monastery settles into stillness. The bookbinder climbs the stairs to his cell. Through the narrow window, stars are visible, distant and bright. Somewhere in the library, his books rest on their shelves, waiting for morning. Somewhere in the chapel, the choir books lie closed on their lecterns, ready for tomorrow's office. He lies down in the darkness. His hands ache slightly, as they often do at day's end. But it is a good ache, the ache of work completed, of something made that will serve its purpose. Tomorrow the bell will ring in the darkness before dawn, and the rhythm will begin again. Prayers and work, silence and devotion, the steady turning of days. And in his workshop there will be pages waiting to be transformed into books, to be given form and permanence, to be offered in service of something larger than himself.